All right. Well, if you're visiting today, welcome to First Christian Church. My name's Cody, and I'm the minister here. And we are in this middle of a sermon series on the life of Jesus, the life of Jesus. I say middle, we're really at the beginning. We're going to be looking at Jesus' life for the next year. And we're going to follow him around. We're going to listen to him. We're going to sit at his feet, hear from Jesus. We're going to even see Jesus through others' eyes as well. And in fact, that's what we're doing today. If you have your Bibles, we're in John chapter 3 today. We're going to be in John chapter 3, starting in verse 22. And we're going to look at Jesus through the eyes of John the Baptist. Now, we're in the book of John. We're going to be in the Gospel of John, but that's not the same guy as John the Baptist, okay? John was a pretty common name. In fact, there are other people in history at this time named John. So John was a pretty common name. But we're going to see Jesus through the eyes of John the Baptist, not John the Apostle, not one of Jesus' disciples, John the Baptist. Now, nobody likes when someone else steals their thunder, all right? Nobody likes that, a thunder stealer, okay? Everyone hates those people. I remember one time I was in, it was freshman at Ozark, second semester, and I was taking a freshman level class called History of Ancient Israel. Okay, and it was at 7 a.m., and so I sat on the front row to kind of try to help me stay awake and all that. You know, it was pretty early for me. Still pretty early for me. But anyway, my best friend and my roommate was taking it with me. Atlas was his name, Atlas. Pretty neat name. Anyway, he was taking class with me. We're sitting on the front row. Professor, good guy, nice guy, pretty laid back. And he's teaching, and he says something, and I kind of just make a joke off of it, just loud enough for him to hear it. And he laughs, points in our direction, and he says, "It's a good one, Atlas." And he just keeps going on. And of course, in the middle of that, in the middle of class at Ozark Christian College, I can't be like, excuse me, that was me. I want to stop class for a second so we can recognize that the professor laughed at my joke, not Atlas's. Oh, you can't do that. You can't do that. I'd be a jerk. But I'm sitting there, and I'm just, there's nothing I can do. And I'm just, and Atlas looks at me, and he's like, yeah, and that's all that goes on with life. Now, in that situation, that's harmless enough. That's harmless enough. Someone stole the credit for a joke in a class. Okay, that's harmless enough. But that same idea of, I want the honor, I deserve the credit, make it about me, that happens on a whole lot of levels in most of our lives. We tend to make everything about us. Me. It's all about me. And that tendency to, I need the credit, I deserve this, let's make sure the spotlight shines on me, me, I want my name out there, that tendency, it's very ugly. It's very ugly. I mean, think about it. If you're you work at a job and you've worked there for a long time and someone else gets a promotion you were going for and they've worked there for a lot less time than you have, they're a lot younger than you are. You think they're so unqualified, they don't have the experience that I do, and what happens? Are you just glad for that person? Yes, I'm glad. I'm glad they got that job. They're doing good, and more power to them. No, we usually start to tear them down in our minds. We think poorly of them. Oh, they're just jerks. I bet you they just knew the boss really well. They don't deserve this, and we just start to tear them down. We have a negative emotional reaction due to something someone else did. It had nothing to do with us. Nobody came up to you and said, "Hey, your job performance is really slipping. You need to step it up." Nobody criticized you. Nobody said anything bad about you. Nobody had anything negative towards you. Someone else had a blessing. Someone else got promoted. And you had a negative emotional reaction to that. How ugly is that? It has nothing to do with you. And yet you're sitting there, I just can't believe it. Can't believe it. I'm so mad. I'm so frustrated. I'm angry at them. You got a neighbor who always seems to get the newest whatever, okay? Newest gadget, newest toy, newest car. He's showing you his watch that can, send text messages and, cook dinner and all kinds of things, whatever. He always gets the newest stuff. Now, he's done nothing to you, and yet are we just happy for him? Oh, look at him. He's driving that new car. He must have got it today. How good for him. No, we don't do that. We go, man, what a materialistic person. He just needs, I bet you he needs that. I bet you he's a jerk. I bet you he doesn't care about people. I mean, he's such a snob. He's such a high and mighty, kind of guy, I'm sure. And we start thinking all these negative things about him. When he's done, nothing has happened to you. Nothing has changed in your circumstances. He has the job. He has the money. He bought the things. It has nothing to do with you. And yet we find a way to hate. We find a way to be angry, to be frustrated, to be negative, because we want to make everything about me. It happened to someone else, but I'm going to turn it into something that's about me. Someone else got a job, but now it's about me. Me, me, me. In America, we have a culture of me. We want to make everything about us. And not only is that ugly, to be angry because someone else increased, because someone else got something we wanted, not only is that just an ugly characteristic, but it's also dangerous. When we tend to make everything about us, me. I'm going to make everything about me. And the problem with that is I'm not perfect. And so when I make everything about me, I magnify everything about me. And because I'm not perfect, I will self-implode. I will destroy myself. I'm not perfect. I have problems. You have problems. And when you make everything about you, those problems get magnified. And you will actually ruin yourself. You have a problem with lust. Now, that doesn't make you a terrible person. You're not a monster. Everyone has problems. Everyone has sins. Everyone struggles. That doesn't make you worse than anybody else. But suddenly, this thing that you struggle with, this temptation that you have a problem with, whenever you make it all about me, it's all about me, and then you turn everything inward, that problem suddenly turns into adultery. I mean, why not? I want it. It's all about me. No one's going to find out. It's going to make me happy, so why not? And then someone does find out, and it ruins your life. You destroyed your life because you made everything about you, and you're not perfect. And that thing that you struggled with beforehand ballooned. It blew up into something much, much greater. This is true, whether you're a Christian or not, this is true for everyone. When you make everything about yourself, you're not perfect. I'm not perfect. And so those problems, those struggles that I have end up ruining our lives. John the Baptist, he understood this. In fact, this exact same situation that we're talking about is going to happen in our text today, where there are some people who are trying to make everything about themselves, and John understands that not only is that ugly, but that's destructive. There's actually a better option. You are not a good person to have all of our focus and attention go on. And I'm not a good person for that either. But there is someone who is. That's exactly what John the Baptist says. Let's get to our text. We're in John chapter 3. We're going to start in verse 22. John 3, starting in verse 22. It says, "Then Jesus and his disciples left Jerusalem. They went into the Judean countryside, and Jesus spent some time there with them there, baptizing people." Now, just a little bit later in chapter 4, it's going to say that Jesus wasn't actually the one baptizing, his disciples were. But Jesus is out there with his disciples. They're out in the Judean countryside. They're out in the wilderness by a river or a body of water, and they're baptizing people. Now we get verse 23. "At this time, John the Baptist was baptizing at Aenon near Salim, because there was plenty of water there, and people kept coming to him for baptism. This was before John was thrown into prison." So John is also out baptizing. Now, he's not like on the opposite end of the country, but he's also not right next to them. Jesus is more in the south. John's kind of in the middle of the country, and he's out by a body of water, and he's also baptizing. So you got Jesus and John out in the wilderness baptizing. Now, let's just, while we're talking about this, let's just clear this up real quick. We got a lot of confusing ideas about baptism, all right? Some people, throw water on you. Some pour it on you. Some put you all the way under. Some put you all the way under and hold you there for a long time. It's confusing. And the problem with it, the reason that is because we didn't translate the word. We transliterated the word. Baptize in Greek is baptizo. We just took the Greek word baptizo and we put English letters with it. And we said, hey, baptize. But you see, the Greek word baptizo actually has a meaning. Okay? It actually means something. In fact, it wasn't even a religious word. The word baptizo just means to go under, to dunk, to submerge. That's all the word means. In fact, Josephus, he was a first century historian, and he writes about this great ship battle. And he talks about ships sinking under the water, and he says they were baptized under the water. He talks about clothing that's been dyed. And he says this has been baptized in red. It's been dunked in red dye. I mean that's all the word means. And that's why Jesus and John, they go out to be near bodies of water, because we got to dunk people. So Jesus and John, they're out baptizing, and this is what happens in verse 25. It says, a debate broke out between John's disciples and a certain Jew over ceremonial cleansing. So John's disciples came to him and said, Rabbi, the man you met on the other side of the river, they're talking about Jesus, the one you identified as the Messiah, is also baptizing people. And everybody is going to him instead of coming to us. This is the exact attitude that we were just talking about. John's name is John the Baptist, okay? If anyone's going to be baptizing people, it should be him, okay? That's his name. He's extremely popular. He's not only in the Bible, but he's also in other recorded histories. I mean, he was a very, very popular guy. And he had a huge influence. Lots of people came out to be baptized by him. In fact, Jesus was baptized by him. If anyone should be more popular, it should be John. But Jesus is growing in popularity, and in fact, he's baptizing more people than John is now. And John's disciples are upset. John, we started this. We did this first. This was our idea. We're the novel ones. Jesus is just copying us. In fact, you baptized him. Shouldn't he be giving you the credit? Shouldn't he be sending people this way? What are we going to do about this? Jesus is more popular than you now. What are we going to do about this, John? The exact same thing. I mean, it's always funny when I read something from thousands of years ago and I think, oh, that sounds a lot like us. We did this first. This was our idea. We started this. This guy's taking the credit for it. What are we going to do about that? What are we going to do about that? This is John's answer to this ugly, destructive tendency that we have to make everything about us. It says in verse 27, John replied, "No one can receive anything unless God gives it from heaven. You yourselves know how plainly I told you, I am not the Messiah. I am only here to prepare the way for him. It is the bridegroom who marries the bride, and the best man is simply glad to stand with him and hear his vows. Therefore, I am filled with joy at his success. He must become greater and greater, and I must become less and less." See, John here says, you know what? The problem is that you guys are just focusing on us. What are we going to do? We started this. What's going to happen to us? This guy's growing in popularity. We're growing less. What's that mean? What's going to happen? What happens if nobody starts coming to us? What happens if nobody is out here with us? What are we going to do? And they make everything about themselves. And John says, no. See, we're not the center of things. Jesus is. So if he grows and we diminish, that's okay. Because we're not the center of things. Jesus is. He uses a couple of illustrations. He says, if you're the best man at a wedding, you're not standing up there thinking, this should be my big moment. Look at all these people out here. All these people, they should be here for me. Okay? I put these two together. Okay? They should be celebrating me. Where are my gifts? Where's my? You don't do that. If you did, you'd be a very, very ugly person. Okay? You're there just to be glad for them. You're glad that so many people are here for them. You're thrilled that they have so many gifts. You're thrilled that they have so much love at the beginning of their life together. You're not there thinking, oh, I wish this was me. I wish I had a big ceremony like this. Maybe I should get married so I can get some presents. Maybe I should. No, you don't do that. And he says, in the same way, we're here, and I'm just happy for Jesus. You know what? It's his ceremony. You know what? It's his church. It's not mine. If he gets more popular and I get less popular, that's okay. That's okay. I don't need to keep my status quo. And he goes on and he ends with this great line. He says, he must become greater and greater, and I must become less and less. He must become greater and greater, and I must become less and less. The words there for greater and less in Greek mean more important and less important. He must get more important, and I must become less important. Not because John says, I'm not a good person or I'm not worthy. It's not like John is like, oh, woe is me, I'm no good. That's not what he's talking about when he says, I must be less. He's saying, because Jesus' importance level rises, my importance level goes down. What he wants supersedes what I want. If we're equals, it's 50-50. If he's slightly above me, it's 60-40. We'll do 60% of the time, Jesus, I'll do what you want. 40% of the time, I'll do what I want. But as his importance level rises, I get my way less and less. And that's exactly what John says needs to happen. Because I'm going to focus on him. He's going to be the center, not myself. See, what John's talking about and what we're going to talk about this morning is this idea called discipleship. Discipleship. Discipleship is the art of making Jesus great and I less. It's the art of making Jesus more important. And as Jesus rises in importance, as he gets promoted, that means he gets his way more and more in my life. It's the art of me getting out of the way so that Jesus can rule, so that Jesus can reign. That's discipleship. That's putting the focus on someone else other than myself. It's not about me. That's an ugly way of thinking. That's a destructive way of thinking. Everything's about me. But you know, Jesus doesn't have problems. He is perfect. Putting everything on him actually will help. That's exactly what John says we need to do. Now the problem is this me way of thinking, this me first, it's all about me. Let's relate everything back to me. This me way of thinking, the problem with that is that's infiltrated the church to where now we become Christians who try to think of it in terms of what is this going to do for me. We become consumers and not disciples. We become consumers and not followers. We want the benefits of following Jesus without having to pay anything for it. You see, I believe there are huge benefits to following Jesus. I really do. I think that if you give your life to Jesus, you will become a better husband, a better wife. You will become a better parent. You will become a better kid. I believe you'll become a better worker. I believe that if you give your life to Christ, you will have more integrity. You'll have more joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, all the fruit of the Spirit, those wonderful things. Who doesn't want more peace in their life? Who doesn't want more joy in their life? I believe that if you give your life to Jesus, you get those things. I mean, I think there are great benefits to following Christ. But the problem is we want to consume those benefits. We want to relate. How does this relate to me? Let's make it all about me. I want the benefits of following Christ without any of the cost, without having to pay anything. See, in a consumer society like we live in, we relate everything to me. What does this have to say about me? What is following Jesus going to do for me? What is church going to do for me? When I show up here, why aren't they doing things my way? They should be, because I'm a consumer. We've let the me mentality trickle into the church, and we become consumers of Jesus and not followers of him. We want to consume him and not follow him. That me mentality that has trickled down into our church, it affects so many things. See, we look at this story and we say, what kind of disciples of John? I mean, these guys are just jerks. I mean, who's upset? Who ever gets upset because Jesus is popular, right? I mean, who's like, oh man, people are really going to Jesus. We need to stop that. You know, who says that? Nobody says that. That's just a terrible idea. Jesus is growing in popularity. We need to figure out something, John, because he's beating you now. No. We look at that and we think that. What silly disciples? You know, John needs to pick them better because these guys just don't get it. But the problem is that we do the same thing. We want credit, even if it's something about Jesus. Jesus is getting credit. Well, but I helped here. Right? Shouldn't there be a plaque somewhere in the church with my name on it? I did that. I helped. I'm the one who gave that. I'm the one who put all the time and effort into that. I know it was for Jesus, but really, shouldn't there be something with my name on it somewhere? We donated that, and I don't think it was being used the way I want it to be. No. I'm going to give this to the church. I'm going to give this to Jesus, but there's stipulations with it. It's got to be done this way. It's got to be used in this manner. It's got to be done exactly the way I'm going to say it's going to be done. You know why? Because I want Jesus to get more important, but I want to get more important too. I want people to know that was me. I was for Jesus, but what's the harm in people knowing that was from me as well? You see, it's the me mentality of how does this relate to me? How can I get credit for this? I did it. It trickles into our faith. We come into church and we look for how can I be made more comfortable here? We don't see how can I make others more comfortable? How can I enhance the worship experience for you? We think, how can I enhance the worship experience for me? Me, what can I get from this? We want to consume Jesus, not follow him, not be a disciple of his. And Peter, the Apostle Peter had this exact same problem. Peter's a great guy to read up on because he's a lot like us. Like he's really I want to do it, I want to give it my all, but I'm going to mess up quite a bit. Okay, so he's a lot like us in that regard. But Peter, he kind of had this same problem. And we see this in Mark chapter 8. Jesus is talking about discipleship there, and Peter has this same problem. It's Mark chapter 8, starts in verse 27. It says, Jesus and his disciples left Galilee and went to the villages near Caesarea Philippi. As they were walking along, he asked them, "Who do people say that I am?" Well, they replied, "Some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, others say you are one of the other prophets." And then he asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter replied, "You are the Messiah." Now, the word Messiah is the Hebrew word for the Greek word Christ. It means anointed one. We're pretty early on in the sermon series, so we'll let this slide, but Christ isn't Jesus' last name, okay? So no one think that. Christ is a Greek word, Christos, which just means anointed one. Same as Messiah, it means anointed one. He says, you are God's anointed one. You are the king that God has sent us. You are God's chosen one, his special one. You are the one that God has destined to do great things. You're God's anointed one. You're the Messiah. That's what Peter says. He starts out by saying, God, Jesus, you are awesome. And you know what? Jesus doesn't deny it, but he says some interesting things about that. See, what Peter is saying right here is, Jesus, you're king. And what Peter's thinking in the back of his mind is, since you're king, we're going to be princes, right? Right? I mean, if you're king of the world, if you're God's anointed one, if you're his special one, we get to be princes, right? I mean, we're on the right team. We're following the right guy. That should come with some benefits, right? And Jesus is going to say some things that aren't going to make Peter happy. Verse 30 says, but Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. You're right, I'm the Messiah. Don't tell anybody. Then Jesus began to tell them that the Son of Man must suffer many terrible things, be rejected by the elders and the leading priests and the teachers of the law. He would be killed, but 3 days later he would rise from the dead. And he talked about this openly with his disciples. Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. So here's Jesus. You're God's chosen one. You're the king. Everything's going through you now. You've got all God's authority and all of God's power. I mean, you're that guy. And then Jesus says, yeah, you're right. And that guy is going to be taken to Jerusalem. He's going to be rejected. He's going to be beat up, tortured, and killed. That's what's going to happen to that guy. And Peter takes him aside and says, no, listen, Jesus, you got to quit talking like that. You're God's guy. You're the anointed one. You're the Messiah. That's not going to happen to you. You quit talking like that. In the back of Peter's mind, he's thinking, you quit talking like that because if that happens to you, what's going to happen to me? If that happens to the king, what's going to happen to the servants? I thought we were going to be princes, Jesus. I thought we were going to be kings. I thought we were going to get some benefit for following you. But if you're going to march to your death, what's going to happen to us? And Jesus goes on in verse 33, and he says, Jesus turned and looked at the disciples, and then he reprimanded Peter. Get away from me, Satan. That hurts. He said, you are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's. You see, from a human point of view, doesn't it make sense that if Jesus is the king, if Jesus is the Son of God, and I'm on his team, shouldn't I get a bunch of benefits for that? I mean, think about that. Like if Jesus is the Son of God, if I'm really close to a presidential candidate, and I'm really helping him in his campaign, and me and him are close, I'm advising him a lot of things, we share a lot of ideas, and then he wins, shouldn't I get some kind of benefit for that? Shouldn't I become some staff member? Shouldn't I get on his team? Shouldn't I become pretty important? Shouldn't I get something for that? And Jesus says, no, Peter, you're only looking at this from a human point of view. See, you don't want your king to be someone who goes, gets beat up, and gets killed, because that means you might have to do the same thing. And then Jesus goes on in verse 34. He says, then calling the crowd to join his disciples, he said, if any one of you wants to be my followers, you must turn from your selfish ways, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. Here's the thing. In a Roman execution squad, they didn't have a cross-bearer position. There wasn't a slave or a servant that's the guy who carries the wood that we're going to crucify the prisoner on. No, the prisoner carried their own lumber. He carried the cross. So you don't pick up a cross unless you're about to die on it. And he says, if you're going to follow me, you need to deny yourself, take up your own cross, and then come follow me. Because that's exactly what I'm going to do. And as my servants, you should look similar. Peter right now is really confused. Because he said, you're the king. And Jesus says, yes, you're right. Now here's what that looks like. And then finally, Jesus ends it out by saying, if you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and the sake of the good news, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world, but you lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my message in these adulterous and sinful days, the Son of Man will be ashamed of that person when he returns in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. And right now, Peter's thinking, I don't know if I like this version of Jesus. Let's go back to anointed one Jesus. Let's go back to Messiah Jesus. Let's go back to God's man Jesus. You see, we have this tendency to think of, well, I'm a Christian now. I'm on Jesus' team. There should be benefits to that. We want to consume Jesus. And Jesus says, no, you're right. You're on my team. Guess what your leader did? He washed feet. He hung out with lepers. He went and died for others. What do you think you're going to do? You see, following Jesus costs something. See, there's two truths. Just like Jesus being king, just like Jesus being the anointed one, and him being the guy who dies for others. Those seem like contradictions. The king doesn't die for other people die for the king. I mean, you get that, right? That seems like a weird contradiction. He's the king, but he's going to die for others. There's also these other two truths that are both true, but they seem really far apart. The first one is that salvation is free. And that's absolutely 100% true. Your salvation is free. It costs you nothing. Someone else did all the work. You realize that, right? Someone else paid everything that needed to be paid. He did the heavy lifting. Someone else did everything that needed to be done. Other religions say you have to get right before you can join us. Jesus never says that. He never says, here's this checklist, make sure these are checked off, and then come to me. He never says you got to get some things together before you start coming to church. He never says you got to get your life put back together before you can get baptized, before you can decide to follow me. No, those things never happen. Jesus never says, do these things and then come join my team. Salvation is free. But following Jesus costs. Discipleship will cost you something. You see, salvation is free. Jesus always says, come as you are. But then he always follows it up by saying, but you can't stay as you are. I want you to come just the way you are. I don't need you to look a certain way or get right in a certain way or follow these 8 steps. I want you to come the way you are, but you're not to stay as you are. Following Jesus will cost you something. You see, somewhere along the road, somewhere in your life, there will be a decision that you have to make. And on the one hand, you'll have what Jesus wants you to do. On the other hand, you'll have what you want to do. And those two things will not be the same. There's this great opportunity, this new job, and it's going to launch this new phase in your life. It's going to launch this new career. It's exactly what you wanted, except that up front they told you they're going to ask you to do something that you think is kind of immoral. Now, you don't have to do it often, but you will have to do it pretty regularly. And man, this is exactly what I want. This is exactly what I've been looking for. But I don't think Jesus would want me to take it. And you might have to give up a whole new chapter in your life because I want to follow Jesus. You might be in a relationship with someone. And man, they're pretty and they're funny and they're perfect. They're sweet. They're kind. I mean, they're just perfect. Except they want to do some things with you that Jesus wouldn't want you to do. And at some point, you might have to give up a relationship to do the Jesus thing. You might actually have to give up a relationship. This could be my future wife, husband. I mean, this could be my future here. You might have to give that up because Jesus says, no, I want you to do something else. Following Jesus will cost you something. Salvation is free. Discipleship costs. Getting married is easy, okay? You just got to say, I do, and sign some papers. I mean, you can make it as fancy as you want, but really it's saying I do, getting someone to sign some papers just right, and you're married. But marriage is hard. Getting married is easy. Marriage is hard. Till death do you part. That's hard. Salvation is free. Discipleship will cost. So the question this morning is, are you a consumer or a disciple? Do you ask Jesus and the church, what can I get from you? Or do you ask, what can I do for you? Do you look to be comfortable or do you seek to make others comfortable? Do you seek to make Jesus great? Or do you ask, how can I get credit here? You see, John's disciples, they had a good heart. They wanted their teacher, John, their rabbi, to be uplifted. They wanted him to be important because they loved him. They cared about him. But their effort was in the wrong direction. And John says, no, this is about Jesus. This isn't about me. It has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with Jesus. If he gets more popular and people forget who I am, that's fine. Because that's all I want. Are you a consumer or are you a disciple? Are we going to be a church that seeks to make Jesus great? If we are, we need to be about what Jesus was about. The way we make Jesus great, the way we lift him up in importance, is we do what he did. Jesus cared about the poor. Do we? Or do we care about how the poor look when they come to church? Jesus cared about healing people. Do we? Or do we only care about getting healing from others? I need my problems fixed. I need this fixed. I've got this going on. And we constantly take from others, but we never really seek to heal. Jesus forgave people. Sometimes he even forgave them before they asked for it. I'm going to heal you, and guess what? Your sins are forgiven too. I didn't even ask for that, but thanks. Do we forgive? Or do we wait for the words, I'm sorry? Jesus took responsibility for other people's mistakes. Do we? Or do we blame everyone else? Not my fault. It's them, it's them. So this is the situation I'm in. It's always something else other than me. See, if we want to be a church that makes Jesus great, then we got to be about what made Jesus great. Are you a consumer? Are we going to be a consuming church, or are we going to be a church full of disciples in 2016? I truly believe there are immense benefits to following Jesus. I truly believe it is a great thing for you in your life if you give your life to Christ. But the thing is, you have to be willing to die to do that. You have to be willing to say no to you. And that's one of the hardest things you will ever do, to say no to me. Cody says no to me. When Cody says no to Cody, when John says no to John, when Jill says no to Jill, that's one of the hardest things you can do. It is literally going to kill yourself. I want to do this, but I'm not going to. I don't want to do this, but I know Jesus wants me to. But the thing is, we follow a guy who died and then rose from the dead. So the question is, do you trust? Do you trust God that if you say no to you, if you take that scary step of, I don't know what the future is going to look like if I say no here, I don't know what's going to happen to me, I mean, I really want to do this, I don't know if this opportunity will ever come again. Maybe this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to do this thing that I feel like Jesus might not want me to do, but it's a once-in-a-lifetime chance, and it's scary to say no to that. Do you trust that God will honor that decision just like he honored Jesus when Jesus died for others? He raised him from the dead. Are you going to be a consumer or a disciple in 2016? Are we going to follow Jesus? Or are we going to add Jesus onto our lives? Let's pray. God, we love you, and we just pray that we have the strength to be disciples. We want to really be about Jesus. We want to seek to make you great. I truly believe, I truly do, that there are incredible benefits, incredible things that go along with following you. And God, I just want those realities to sink in here at First Christian Church. But the only way we get access to those is if we have the trust and the faith in you to do the scary thing, which is say no to ourselves. To do the scary thing, which is to die to ourselves in order to be your follower, to be your disciple. God, the me idea of me first, that doesn't work in real life, and that doesn't work in the church either. So God, I just pray that we can work in 2016 to be a church that focuses on you, that says we want to make Jesus great. And in the process, if that means that we don't get credit for something, that's fine. God, we need your strength in doing this. We love you, Father. Let me pray this in your Son's name. Amen.